Welcome learners to the second video of conceptualizing phase. In this video we'll discuss about concept mapping. So what is concept mapping? Well, concept mapping is a general method that can be used by an individual or group to describe ideas about some topic in pictorial form. So you want to describe some abstract idea or some concept using some pictorial notation. So what is this pictorial notation is all about? What is this pictorial form is all about? Let's look into it. You also know concept mapping from different names such as mental mapping or concept webbing. All these three things are actually one the same. What is concept mapping? It is primarily a group process, right? So maybe it is well suited for situation where group of researchers have to work together. So maybe you are trying to understand, describe a complex idea which has different dimensions to it. So how you are going to do that? Don't you think it would be great if you allow multiple people who have some skills or interest or who have undergone some kind of experience dealing with that phenomena to describe it in their own words, and then you have some way to sort those ideas, to combine those ideas and into different sections, and you could do a lot of things later on. So what is concept mapping? It is primarily a group process, and it uses a structured approach. So normally it is assisted by a trained facilitator, and third thing is it uses multivariate statistical method, because there are different parties, there are different people who provide input into the group process. So your idea is to take input from different people and finally arrive at a group product. So something which shows that aggregate, or actually how these ideas are, there has to be some commonality or common ground where you could structure these ideas into different dimensions. So that requires you to use multivariate techniques, and finally use of computer to analyze. So what you do in concept mapping, there are 6 steps to concept mapping. It begins with the preparation phase, or the first level of preparing project. What we do at this stage, we normally do 3 things. First, we identify who would be the participants. So there may be thousands, hundreds or thousands of stakeholders, but we are not going to involve everyone into concept mapping. Instead, we'll select a small group of 10 to 20 of the stakeholders, and then we move to the next level of developing the focus. So these 10 to 20 people would try to arrive at what is the problem. So they could be defining a problem, or maybe the treatment or procedure, or they might be mapping all the expected outcome of a given program or intervention. So stakeholders and their ideas based on some kind of focus, and finally they develop an appropriate schedule for the mapping. So schedule has to do with sequencing and importance, what will come first, what will come subsequently, and all. So this is the first step, that is to do with preparing project. Now the next step is idea generation round. So you actually allow those participants, 10 or 20 participants which you have chosen, to generate a large set of statements that address the focus. So suppose you want to address, let's say your idea is to eradicate poverty. Let's say it is actually the first SDG, no poverty in this world. So how you can address that? So let's say stakeholders are, let's say the policy makers, set of 20 people, they are discussing on, they are coming up with different kind of statements like, okay, there should be some programs that generates that promotes education, quality of life, means of livelihood, and all kind of all such interventions that addresses directly or indirectly the economic status of the person, so that improves the economic status of, let's say, a poor person. So here what you are doing, you are actually generating a large set of statements which aim to address the focus. How do you do that? Brainstorming is a perfect way, nominal group technique, focus group, one way or the other you have these ways of idea generation. So first is preparing project, next is idea generation. Let's say you are able to generate some 200 statements, but not very specific about 200 statements. It is about some kind of software limitation. When when this book was written, it was about that the computer used to handle 100 statements only, but now that is no longer the case. You have a good number of softwares to do text analysis. Now third step is structuring, where two things participants do at this stage. Number one is sorting the statements into piles of similar statements, so with each pile having a descriptive label. So you actually, let's say you have 100 statements, so let's say 1, 3, 10, 77, these all statements are actually very close, so you combine them into one cluster. You say that this is one pile. Okay, next is you also rate the statements for their relative importance to the focus, to the idea, where you assign 1 to those which are relatively unimportant and 5 to those which are extremely important. So you do two things. One is sorting the statements into different piles and rating each statements from 1 to 5, where 1 means relatively unimportant and 5 being extremely important. Fourth one is representation, where you do actually multi-dimensional scaling and cluster analysis. Two things you do at representation. Multi-dimensional scaling is actually representing each statement as a point on the map, and the statements that are piled together are closer to each other on the map. Let me show you like this. If you have these statements, let's say you have 100 different statements, so as you could see, each statement is there in the present on the map, and you could see that some points are relatively closer, they are making some kind of cluster, as you could see. So these are basically the points which are closer to each other, because we have done rating also. 1 means important, 5 being extremely important, or 1 means unimportant, and we have similar statements, right, belonging to a pile. So that is why we have to do like that. And next one is our cluster analysis, where we take the output of the multiple dimensional scaling and participations in the map into a group of statements or ideas into cluster. So now we have group of statements or ideas which are now which represent some kind of cluster. So what is a cluster? Cluster is like this. So let's say you have you are creating a concept mapping for the your country elderly project. So for elderly project you have these kinds of clusters coming in. Let's say how elderly people, so why they want to live into some kind of, why they want a special care, something related with family issues, competence, lack of supervised care. So there could be home services, some alternatives, political strength, personal growth and education. So these are different kinds of clusters. Finally, your interpretation, where facilitator work with the stakeholders group to develop its own labels and interpretation for various map. And the sixth step is utilization, where stakeholder use the map to help address the original focus. So concept mapping is a visual representation of concept. That is why concept mapping. So visual framework for operationalizing the program. So if there is a program which is to be implemented, what all things are needed to be done in that program. Now you have different dimensions and you could see them, everyone could see them, it is there for public view. And on the outcome side, it would help to display results, or developing measures and displaying results. It can be used for that. So this is all about the steps in concept mapping. We discussed about these 6 steps, from preparing project, where the focus was to participant and schedule, to idea generation round, which is the second step. The third one is structuring idea, where we were doing 2 things, sorting and rating. Finally, multidimensional scaling and cluster analysis. And fifth one is interpret mapping, and in the final phase we actually utilize those maps from operational perspective or outcome perspective. So this is all in this lecture. Keep watching for more information.